Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling rivers. But not just like dipping our toes in, we're talking full-on headwaters to the sea exploration of how these forces of nature carve out the landscapes around them.
It's really incredible when you think about it, right? I mean, it's just water, but give it enough time and it can carve out entire canyons.
That's what we're diving into today, the incredible landforms created by rivers, all those canyons and gorges, and, well, you probably know them better than I do.
Exactly. And that's where erosion really takes center stage. Think like waterfalls.
Oh man, waterfalls. There's nothing quite like seeing a huge waterfall just like thundering down. You can just feel the power.
Right. And that power, that's erosion in action.
So how do they actually form though? What's the geological process behind a waterfall?
So you've got to have different types of rock. Like imagine a layer of harder rock on top of softer rock.
Okay, got it. Hard rock over soft rock.
And that river, it just keeps flowing over that harder rock, right down onto the softer rock, and over time.
It wears it away. It's like water drilling through stone.
Exactly. And that's how you get that drop off. That's your waterfall. And if you look at, let's see, this image here, you can see how the softer rock erodes away kind of under the hard rock.
Oh, so it's like the waterfall is eating its way backward?
Yeah, exactly. The water plunges down, carves out this pool at the base. We call it a plunge pool. And eventually,
The hard rock's got to go somewhere.
exactly. Eventually it collapses, the waterfall moves upstream, and boom, you've got yourself a gorge.
Wow, so every gorge tells a story, huh? It's like a scar in the earth from a waterfall on the move. Okay, so we've seen how erosion creates these dramatic drops, these waterfalls. But what about like the area around a river? I'm imagining like looking out from a waterfall, what shapes would I see in the land?
You'd see the land carved into these sort of interlocking spurs, like almost like teeth.
Oh yeah, interlocking spurs. They always look so random, but I guess there's a reason for those shapes.
Think of the river like a sculptor. Right. Chiseling away at the land over time. The harder rock, it resists the erosion, so it forms these spurs, these teeth, and the softer rock between them. That gets carried away.
It's wild to think about these processes shaping the planet around us, even the mountains we think of as permanent. So our river, it's made its way down from the mountains, right? It's not that raging torrent anymore. What happens as it chills out a bit?
Chills out is a good way to put it. It's less about that raw erosive power and more about finding a balance. It's still powerful, but, it's settled down a bit, matured.
I like that. So less about carving rock and more about what's the river up to now?
Well, it's still eroding, still carrying sediment, but it's also depositing that sediment.
Yeah.
And as the valley widens, the river starts to meander.
Meanders. Those are so cool. Like those big looping bends you see in rivers.
Those are the ones. And they're not just random curves either. There's some serious physics behind how they form.
Oh, I bet. It's got to be something about how the water flows, right? Like the outside of the bend versus the inside.
Exactly. So think about it. Water on the outside of the bend, it's got to travel further, right? Faster flow, more energy. That's where erosion really kicks in and carves out that steep bank, what we call a river cliff.
Ah, so the outer bend is like the erosion zone. What about the inner bend? Does anything happen there?
The inner bend is where things slow down. The water loses energy and it dumps the sediment it's been carrying. And that's how you get those gently sloping banks, the slip-off slopes.
Never a dull moment.
And that's the thing about rivers. They're dynamic. Always changing, always on the move. And sometimes those meanders, they get a little carried away.
Carried away? What do you mean?
Well, imagine a meander that's gotten so curvy, it's almost a loop, right? Then you get a big flood, water's rushing through.
It cuts right through the neck of that loop. I've seen diagrams of this.
Exactly. Creates a shortcut, and suddenly that old meander loop, it's cut off from the river.
And that's how you get an Ox-Bow Lake. So cool. It's like a little piece of the river's past, just frozen in time.
And they create these amazing little ecosystems. But even an Ox-Bow Lake, as tranquil as it seems, it's still subject to change.
Wait, really? I thought once a lake, always a lake.
Not quite. Over time, sediment will fill it in. Maybe it becomes a marsh. Maybe it just blends back into the floodplain. Nothing in nature stays the same forever.
So our river's journey is winding down, right? It's made its way through the mountains, meandered across the landscape. What happens as it, gets ready to meet the sea?
Well, it's carrying all this sediment, right? All that eroded material from upstream, It's got to go somewhere.
And that's where floodplains come in, right? Those wide, flat areas on either side of a river.
You got it. Floodplains are like the culmination of all that erosion and deposition we've been talking about.
So it's not just about flooding, is it? It's about what the flood leaves behind.
Exactly. That sediment-rich water spills out over the banks, the water recedes, and boom, you've got a fresh layer of fertile soil.
Makes sense why floodplains are so important for agriculture. It's like nature's fertilizer factory.
Exactly. And not just for us. It's that nutrient-rich soil that makes floodplains such vibrant ecosystems.
But okay, if these areas flood so often, why aren't they, just always underwater?
Good question. That's where levees come in.
Levees, like a dam.
Kind of, but naturally formed. Like every time the river floods, it deposits its heaviest sediment right next to the riverbank.
So over time,
You get these raised embankments, these levees, that help contain the flow of the river. Natural flood control.
it's pretty amazing how these processes work together, huh?
And this is where things get really interesting. Because where a river meets the sea, that's where you get an estuary.
Estuary. Okay, I've heard that word before, but what exactly is it?
Imagine this. Fresh water from the river, salt water from the ocean, all mixing together in this dynamic, ever-changing environment.
Sounds kind of chaotic.
It is. But that chaos is what makes estuaries so unique. You've got tides coming in and out, swirling currents, and these incredible ecosystems like mudflats.
Mudflats, like just mud.
Don't be fooled. They might not look like much, but mudflats are teeming with life. They're nurseries for fish, they're stopover points for migrating birds.
It's like the river's last hurrah, right?
Yeah.
Creating this whole other world before it merges with the ocean.
Exactly. And it's a powerful reminder that everything's connected. What happens upstream in a river, it affects the estuary. And the health of that estuary, it affects the entire coastline.
Wow. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From those raging waterfalls in the mountains all the way to the quiet power of an estuary, we've seen how rivers carve and shape the land, creating some of the most incredible features on our planet.
And remember, this is just one river. Imagine all the other rivers out there, each with its own story, its own journey from source to sea.
It makes you appreciate the power of nature, doesn't it? And the importance of understanding these processes, these forces that have been shaping our world for millennia. So next time you see a river, take a moment. Think about where it came from, where it's going, and all the incredible things it took to get there. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.